Working through the 3.1 tutorial as it's presented in the textbook. We have the HTML file, the reset file, the styles, and the home CSS. Home CSS is the one where we'll be doing all of the work. The styles, PC_styles1 is provided by the book, and that gives some core style information for the page, setting things up so that we don't have to worry about that. Most of that is content from the previous section in the book when we were talking about colors and fonts and things like that. The reset will be covered in the book, but I've just provided it because it's a lot of typing and we've already talked through the content of it, so it doesn't make sense to have you go through and try and type or add any of that in to the document. But currently, the first thing I'll want to do is I need to link my HTML file to my CSS files. The order in which we do this matters. So we need to link these in a specific order. We need to think general to specific. The most general CSS file that I am working with is going to be my reset file, because that's not specific to anything on this page. These are all generic tags. These are all just basic tags, and we're formatting them so that their default has been neutralized, so now any visual display is left up to us. So now if I save this and go back and look at my page and reload it, we will see that margin padding is 0. Everything went to the side, underlines left on my links, so now we can style those and make those all nice and pretty. So that's going to be the first element that we will add into our document. The second CSS we want to link to is the prepared styles that are being provided by the book, and this would be PC_styles1.css. Now if I look at my page with that, we will see that it sets some of my background colors, it sets my fonts. When I roll over links, we can see how they turn these nice shades of chocolate brown. Other links that aren't in the brown area, then they get the underline when I roll over them. So we have some core layout or coloring and font styling occurring by linking to those documents. The next page that we are going to link to is going to be the bc_home_text.css file. Whoops. So pc_home_text.css. And when I do that, we shouldn't see too much happen because there's no content yet. So now the next step that we'll be looking at is adding in the content to our page of our CSS to help create the layout as it is desired by the book. The first thing we want to do to start making our page look a little bit nicer on screen is to add a style for the body. And for this, I am going to set a max width on my body of 960 pixels. I'll set a min width of 640 pixels. And I will set the actual width that I want my document to be at 95%. Now, once I've done that and reload the page, we can see how it now changes, but then it stops. The header picture is extending beyond, so it's going to need some resizing, but we will take care of that in a little bit. So as we look at the header here, we're going to go into the body, and we'll say the header that is contained within directly in the body tag and an image that's within that, so it doesn't affect all images. This will only affect the image that's inside the header. We say display block, remembering that images by default display inline, but we want to display it as a block. And then I will set its width to 100%. 100% will be 100% of the width of its parent. And because the header tag doesn't have any sizing attached to it, it's going to go up to the body, and it's going to go find the body, which does have a size, which is 95%, maxing at 960, going only as small as 640. If we go back into our page, and when we go body and then we say header and then image and we use the angle bracket or caret, we need to have spaces on either side of that, otherwise it will not work. I thought we could get away with not having spaces, but apparently I need spaces. Centering the page is something we just add that back into the body tag and we can center it. Now, knowing as we do this that we already set the margin of the body to 0 in our reset style, I can just repeat that 0 and say I want my top and bottom margins to be 0 and my left and right to be auto. And that's giving me an equivalent of, had I just written margin left auto, margin right auto, knowing that it already is set to 0 in my reset, I can just do margin left auto, margin right auto, or I can just do margin 0 auto, one line instead of 2. I like the speed of typing that. It kind of depends, but if I need my top and bottom not to be 0 or not to be the same value, if I wanted my top margin to be like 10, well, I could put in 10. I would, of course, if I say 10, I do have to specify 10 what? 10 pixels, 10 millimeters, 10 inches, 10 ems, 10 viewport units. But we would have to specify what. If we say 10, we have to say what. If I say 0, it doesn't matter what the units are because 0 is 0 no matter what it is. So if I do that, now we have our page nicely centered on screen, and we're getting closer to seeing all of the magic happen as our page comes together. Next element that we want to work with is going to be our horizontal navigation. Now, this is under the body, our header. Because we have horizontal navigation occurring in more than just the header, we're being specific in how we name it. So if I look here, I have body, header, nav. Nav has a class of horizontal navigation, so I'm targeting specifically horizontal navigation using the dot here. So nav dot horizontal navigation, and then my list item. I want each one of those list items in my navigation list to have a width of 20%. So I don't have to know how many pixels big it is. I just know I want each of those to be 20%. So instead of being vertical, we need to also say our nav dot horizontal navigation list item. In this, all of those we want to display block and float left. So by floating them, they're going to then, instead of being blocks stacking on top of each other, they will then move into a line. And you will notice that there's a difference here. The first one we say we want these to be 20%. But here I say I want all horizontal nav list items to display block and left. Because if I look at the code, I will see that there's also a horizontal nav down here that's not in the header that has different items in it. So each one of these is, this is targeting all horizontal navigations. This is targeting just the ones inside the header. And now reloading it, we can see my images are now trying to like stack themselves next to each other, best as they're able to fit on screen. And my top navigation is across here, but it looks kind of junky because the text is not displaying really very effectively in it. So we're going to have to affect the anchor tags because the color, as it's been applied inside our styles, we will see that in my horizontal navigation, it has a brown background color. And when we roll over it, it has this other background color, and that's applied just to the anchor tags. Well, those anchor tags now are not a block level element inherently because they're just surrounding the content that's inside that list item. And as a consequence, it looks junky. Because if we look back at this, those tags just don't look as effective as they could. So if we go back into our horizontal navigation anchor tags and we tell those to display block, and display block will make their backgrounds fill their whole area. And if we say text align center, that will center the text within that block. I'm going to temporarily comment that out. And if we look at it, now we can see how they're there. Actually, apparently they're centering of their own accord. So something else is telling them to center somewhere. But now my links look much happier. We need to take this block of text here, and we're going to set that up so it forms a left block, and then these images will form a right block. All of these vertical lists are going to line up along the bottom, and that's what's coming up next. So we work left column, right column, and then the footer, which is all of those vertical columns of content. Moving into the left column here, this is going to be section. And then what section? It is my left column. And inside my left column, I am going to set some styles for it. I'm going to first say clear. And in this case, I can say clear left because things were floated to the left. If I want to be safe, I can just write clear both, and then I don't have to care what happened with floats before it. 95% of the time, if you are clearing, putting in the clear statement, clear both will work, and then you don't have to think about, well, is it floated left or right above that? I don't know. Just clear both, done. There are some layouts where you may want to only clear it from left things, because you can float some objects left, some objects right, and then if you want something to clear it, you may only want it to clear the left objects or the right objects. I don't think I've ever done a design like that except as proof of concept, but in any type of production work, I can't imagine where we would use it. So after we have said clear at this point, we're going to now float this element to the left, because when we float it, then we'll be able to get this paragraph of text to the left, and then we'll have the group of pictures off to the right. And we will give this paragraph a width of 33%. And as I do that and save it and now go back into my chocolates page and reload that, we'll see how that paragraph is now floating over here on the side. Nice and pretty. The next thing that I can do is work the right column. Now as I look at the right column section, now with the right column, we're going to be floating this one left as well. And it's going to have a width, this time of 67%. Key thing to recognize here is the 33 and 67 add up to 100, so those two columns are then completely filling the width of their parent element, which is section. And we can see now left column, right column, and that bumped. By doing that, that bumped all of this stuff here, which is going to be in my footer. It bumped that all now down to the next chunk. Now continue on in my right column. We're going to set a few properties here. And with this, I'm going to set my section right column, and we're going to set the nav, and in this case it is a horizontal navigation. We'll set these nav LIs and we'll give them a width of 25%. See what happens. You can say, it's interesting, but our pictures aren't really behaving here. So we're getting some issues going along with those pictures, and we're going to have to modify those pictures to get them to fill the space properly. So let's tame those pictures, and to tame those pictures we can simply go into our section once again, and you will notice it's a little repetitive when we're trying to specify things where it's section, right column. But what we have to do is we have to be specific. Our style sheet has to be able to target things specifically. So we're section, right column. In this case, I'm now going to be aiming for images. I will be looking for an image tag. And these images, then, I want to set their property so that they scale themselves as blocks. And they will have their width set up as 100%. Remembering that the image is a child of the list item. The list item has its width at 25% of the column, so each image is going to be 100% of that 25, because width percentages are in relation to their parent container. And now my pictures beautifully resize themselves to fill the space. One of the things we will notice, though, is this text, it does need to kind of bump in a little bit. So we need to modify within that left column. It'd be nice to put a little bit of padding on the left and around elements just to make things have a little more space in relation to the borders. So if we look inside our left column, if I just do padding, go 1.5 ems, you'll see that our whole thing just kind of blows up. And that's a sad day when that happens. Our container has blown up because we've now made the content too big to fit within the size of it, because the default property for box sizing is content box, not border box. So padding and margins are added to whatever size we've set an object. So if we say an object is, say, 200, and then we put 20 pixel margin and padding on, we're now really looking at a box that is 280 pixels in size instead of 200 total. And we're able to create that total by setting our box sizing value to border box. So if we specify a size, that size includes borders, margins, and padding. If we go with the other option is content box, and in content box the size is the size of the content, but margin and padding are extra. So we want to go with border box, and if we do that and reload our page, now it fixes itself again, and we get this nice spacing here, so it's not so text against the edge with no margin, and then that's butt ugly, and we don't want that. Final thing we need to work on fixing are the footer, or is the footer down here, because our footer is a series of columns that's not working quite well. It's vertical navigation, so we have multiple navs. Each is a vertical nav element. So it's nav with the class of vertical nav, and we can see how we have those 3 inside the footer, and then we finally have our final section as part of it. So going back into the styles that we will be working on now, it's moving into the footer section of the document here. Just put in a comment down there so I can keep my text appearing a little bit higher. And thing that we need to add into the footer, well, we should address the footer, and we will say clear. And if we can use clear left because all of our floats have been to the left. If we just want to be lazy and not have to think about it, we can use clear both. We're not having to worry too much about it on this particular layout, but it's a good practice since we floated things above it and we want to guarantee the footer ends up beneath it. If we took that out, would we notice? Probably not, but if we changed the content above, it's possible that then the footer would try and creep up, and then we'd be like, oh no, I don't want the footer up there, it's supposed to be at the bottom. So putting the clear on the footer is a safety that helps to protect us. Now if we go into the footer and go into our nav, and this is now vertical navigation, and if we tell our vertical navigation we want to float it left and give it a width of 25%, now if we go and look at this, we'll see that they have wandered onto the bottom of the screen, and that's pretty awesome the way that we've been able to get them down there. Now the section in the footer, as we look at that, that has the contact info ID associated with that, we're going to float that one as well and give this one a width then of 34%. And then when we look, we can go, whoa, we broke some things. So now at this point, we're going to have to figure out how to correct some of the issues that are happening in our document. So as was kindly pointed out, I misread it. It's 22, not 25. Then we can do the math, and then that's going to work out. But our footer, now I wanted to have a background color on it. And I don't need a separate tag. I can just go back into the footer tag and add in a background color, RGB, and we'll just set this with the color of 71, 52, and 29. Gives it kind of a nice chocolate brown, but it doesn't work due to the evils of container collapse. So we are going to have to address the container collapse as it's happened in our document. Now the container collapse happens when we float all of the elements within a container. The container essentially has no height to it any longer because the floated elements are considered not as part of the calculation of the content of that container. It's kind of a quirk of how CSS works, but we can live with it. So we'll just take our footer tag and we're going to use the pseudo element of after. So we're going to add on to this just a little extra thing. So first we just have to do a little clear. We'll just go clear both, keep ourselves safe. And then we add a little piece of worthless empty content. I already ranted about this previously, but the content is simply nothing. It's an empty string, quotation marks with nothing in it. And then finally we set its display value to table, and that helps to kick it into gear so that now when we refresh the page, it fills it up and gives us a nice chocolatey brown footer. We have our images and words we can roll over. Those would be links that would point to all of these delectable chocolate treats. We have our main navigation here, which could point to other pages on our website as well.